Well, why don't you grab your seat this morning? We're super excited that you're here with us today. Welcome to Real Life. We love that God has given us this mission. We get to do this together. Hey, happy Father's Day. Men, can we just give it up for the men in the room that are dads, that are sacrificing? I love it. I love it. No, that was not about you, Tony, but I appreciate you doing that. Hey, this is Alex Rowan. He's one of our young leaders. He's been awesome. Last 2.5 years, I remember getting to baptize him over at the elementary school. God brought him to Spokane to go to Whitworth University about 4 years ago. He just graduated just a few weeks ago with a theology degree, with a call of God on his life to be a pastor in ministry. Not knowing exactly what those steps look like, Alex has just been faithful, and he's been taking the steps that are in front of him. That's what I appreciate about this man. He is really becoming this amazing man of God. What's so cool is we love being a church that is raising up people to take responsibility, not only for their own lives and their families, but also for the mission. And Alex is taking responsibility that way. What's so cool is a church in Colorado, which is his home state, where he came from originally, has offered him a position as a pastor to be in ministry down there. And we get to just send him off with all of our love and all of our gratitude of what he just is sacrificing what God's been doing in this guy and through this guy. He's been one of our worship leaders the last couple of years and doing an amazing job. Can we just thank God and thank Alex for serving so faithfully? Love you, man. Appreciate you. All right. Well, I want to make sure everybody gets on the same page here with us today. Would you, if you didn't get one of these bulletins, I know we are missing some people on the way in. Apologize for that. If you didn't get one, you need a bulletin or a pen. You're going to want to fill out our connection card that's inside your bulletin. It looks like this. I want everybody, please, 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 to fill this out. Here's why. We believe that God has called us to be on this massive mission to reach the world for Jesus one person at a time. But God's strategy has been for us to be in real relationship together. Just attending a service is not relationship quantified. And so we really believe this is your starting spot. This is your first step, but it's not your only step. We're going to talk more about that in a few minutes. But we really want to help you connect here at Real Life with us. If you didn't get one of those, just put your hand up. We'll make sure you get one right now to make sure that everybody can. We're going to pass some buckets along in just a moment. We want to make sure everybody can drop those cards as well as our giving in the buckets as they go by. Hey, if you're new with us, do not want you to feel obligated or pressured to give. We've got a team that is learning to grow in generosity and learning to give sacrificially and financially to the mission. It's been amazing to see what God is doing. If you don't get a chance to give in the bucket, you can give online, rlmspokane.com. You could do that. We'd love for you to join us this way to help continue to move the mission of God forward financially. We want to challenge you that way as well. So we'll pass those buckets in just a moment. Not yet. Get ready. Fill out the cards. Get your offering ready. We'll do that in just a second. I just want to celebrate with you. Last week, we got to baptize during this service, literally the oldest couple that we've ever baptized at Real Life, Dusty and Gail Rhodes. I want to celebrate that again, that God is moving and changing hearts, as well as on Wednesday night at Thrive, our student ministry, we got to baptize another student here. That's not the pictures of the students, but there was a video that hopefully is there somewhere. But we got to baptize another student on Wednesday night at our student ministry. Can we just thank God for moving in our students' hearts that way? I think it is so awesome that we get to see lives being changed so consistently in front of us. And here's what's so great for me, is that God is using you. Just like Andy up here, so many others are being impacted by what God is doing in your heart and through you as you are being really moved to a place of getting on mission with God. And we're just so grateful that God's doing this in our midst. So, offering team, why don't you guys go ahead and pass those buckets along. Drop your connection cards and your giving in those buckets as they go by. We are going to do, you notice we didn't do communion. If those of you that are normally with us, we're going to do that here at the end of service together in just a few minutes, because we have kind of a different time together today. We're in a series called John's Witness of Jesus, studying through the book of John, the Gospel of John, and we're going to actually push pause on that series for today. We're going to pick that up next week, and today I really want us to spend some significant time together talking about what God is doing, and here's why. As an eldership and as a staff, as a core leadership, we have been praying a ton the last 3 weeks. God has been showing us a ton in our hearts personally, as well as where we are as a church, and I want to bring you in the loop today And so those of you that are new with us today, this is going to be kind of a glimpse for you into the inner workings of who God has called us to be and made us to be. And some of you are maybe not certain of where you stand with Jesus or his church, and you're here exploring. Here's going to be kind of, like I said, a behind the scenes. You're going to get to see kind of how this church operates, who we are, what God has called us to. And I pray this, if you don't know Jesus today, and maybe you've been kind of around church in the past and you're not really comfortable with church, you're kind of on pins and needles, even the fact that you're in the room today, I believe God is going to break down some of those walls for you today. Some of you are even going to make a decision today to follow Jesus. Some of you, this is going to be just a shot where you go, wow, church isn't all that I kind of pictured in my head that I thought it was. All those negative things, I believe that God's going to kind of help you to see past some of that stuff and really give you a glimpse. For those of you that are part of the family, I pray that this would be a unifying time for us as a church. Jesus prayed in John 17 that we would be one just as he and the Father are one. Communication is very critical for us to be in the loop and in unity together. And so I'm praying that that's what God's going to do in this time. So if you would you please just pray with me as we go together through this time? Right now, God, I just humble my heart before you, Lord, and just thank you for this opportunity to be on mission with you. God, we get to be a church, your church, together. I never dreamt of moments like this or days like these or opportunities like this. God, it is clearly by your grace that we are here today, and I just thank you. Thank you for every heart in this room that is committed to you. I pray, God, that you would inspire those of us in this room that are stuck today to take our next step. Those that are far from you, God, I pray that you would just bring an overwhelming amount of your grace. God, bring your presence in this time. I ask, God, that you would just strengthen our resolve to be who you're calling us to be, God. We love you and we trust you. In Jesus' name, amen. What I'd like for you to do is, if you've got a sheet of paper, I don't think we provided one for you, or you got your phone or your tablet, and you want to take some notes, you want to follow along with us, I want to just give you some stuff, and I want you to write some stuff down as we're talking. I actually have a very high-tech gadget up here with me. Some of you have not seen these in years. Might as well have an overhead projector, huh? This is a flip chart, and I've got a pen, and it's very high-tech, but you're going to have to bear with me on that. I really want to bring us in the loop here in a few minutes on what God is doing here. And I want to start this way. You got to know this, that as a church, we exist to reach the world for Jesus, one person at a time. We did not make that up. We believe that that is God's heart. When you look at scriptures like Matthew 28, 19 and 20, where Jesus says, go make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, just like what Andy was doing. Teach them to obey everything I've commanded you, and I will be with you to the very end of the age. We see Jesus' heart for all nations, for this entire world. 2 Peter says that God's not slow in returning, as some count slowness, but he's patient. He's not willing that anyone would perish. We look at passages like Luke 19, where Jesus came individually to Zacchaeus. Zacchaeus shows this spiritual hunger, and he climbs up in a tree to see this guy Jesus that everybody's talking about. And Jesus said, hey, come down. I'm going to your house today. At the end of that passage, Jesus says, Luke 19:10, he says, I came to seek and save the lost. We see God's heart and we go, yeah, we exist to line up with God's heart, to not ask God to join us on our mission. Many of us have wasted our entire lives asking God to bless our mission. As a church, we started 2.5 years ago with this heart in mind. We don't want to just be another church in another city, in another part of the world going, yeah, we got a church. We desire to be the church that Jesus designed, the church that he called us to be. We take that theology, those scriptures I was just sharing with you, and we go, okay, his heart's for the entire world, but his heart's also for the individual. So we say we exist to reach the world for Jesus, one person at a time. It's easy to get overwhelmed by the world, but it's really easy to miss the one person standing in front of us. Today is going to be somewhat of a refocus for us to understand who God has called us to be. And I talk about the beginning of this church 2.5 years ago for this reason, because in the midst of uncertainty and unclarity, it's always important for us to go back to why we originally started. It's so critical for us to understand that we just wanted to be the church that Jesus designed. I didn't want to be some other church. I didn't want to be those guys' church or that guy's church. I wanted to be who God has called his church to be. We had a desire to just get a group of people together who really actually believed that God could use us to be the men and women that he has designed and called us to be. Because of that, we started. We met, started with about, I think, 10 or 12 of us men meeting Thursday mornings down at Tomato Street on Division. We met there early in the mornings, just talking about, we had a big board. It was a chalkboard, even more prehistoric than this. We had a chalkboard, and we were talking, okay, what does it mean to be Jesus Church? Oh, well, Jesus Church reaches lost people. We see people come to know Jesus like Andy just did. Okay, we write it up on the board, and we go, okay, that's a great concept. Some of you have been to churches that want to reach lost people. How are we doing it? As men in that room together, we go, how you doing? Are you doing it? Because we knew that we weren't going to start a church that reached lost people if we weren't reaching lost people. Does that make sense? If we weren't committed ourselves personally to living out the mission, this church would never live out the mission that God had given us. And so we started at that very critical time, about 3 years ago right now, before we launched services. Meeting in the mornings, then out of that, a bunch of groups started multiplying as people were inviting friends and family members. People were connecting and starting to experience what real relationship is, and these connect groups just continued to grow. To the point where in October of 2010, we're coming up on that 3-year anniversary, we saw the need for us to launch weekly services, to get together like this and remind each other, inspire each other to be who God had called us to be, to take our next steps. It's like a team at halftime, right? We've been out on the field all week. We've been kind of exhausted, running hard, trying to be the men and women that God had called us to be, and we need a refocus every week like this. This is why the weekend gathering is so essential. That you don't go a month before you get back here, because we drift off in just a matter of a day, don't we? We need to get together like this so that we can be reminded of who God has called us to be and to be inspired. I need courage. I don't have enough courage in myself. Most of us don't. And we need moments like this where we're inspired, we sing, we gather, we unify our hearts, we go, yeah, this is what God has called us to. Let's go. This is why we started this church. And I look at the time right now where we are at, and we moved in this building just a few months ago, and it's been crazy. We started a location downtown. That's been crazy. We've been doing a lot and working hard as a church. It's been fun, but it's been hard. In the last 3 weeks, we really see that there's some inconsistencies that we need to look at. But those inconsistencies are in the midst of some amazing miracles, and here's what God has really been reminding us of. When we are simply who God has called us to be, miracles happen. He's not asking us to be someone else. Many of us have wasted our entire lives trying to be somebody else. Stop. It's a waste of our time. And I believe that God has called us to be his church and to learn together what it looks like to be his church. The hardest thing for us is to be who God is calling us to be, to just be who we say we are. We're Real Life Ministries. We exist to reach the world for Jesus one person at a time. You don't know how many thousands of times I've said those words. But for me to take the really hard look at my own life and go, am I? Am I committed to that? Are you? Are we? Are we being the church that God has designed us and called us to be? That question is a great question, but it's a hard question when you're not just looking externally, but you actually start looking internally. Am I? Asking ourselves that. Integrity, consistency are some of the hardest things for us to develop. Men, fathers, I love Father's Day because it's a reminder of us of what's most important in our lives. As men, we lack integrity so much of the time, and I'm not here to belittle or berate us because of those things, but to really refocus our hearts and go, we have a desire inside of us as men to lead courageously. God has put that desire there. And most often, we settle for something less because we are so unwilling to take responsibility. And Father's Day, my little girls, last night, because this morning, today, I'm all day. I'm gone till 8 o'clock tonight. But my girls last night, they gather around me and they give me these cards that they wrote and this little present that they gave, got for me. And it's just this like overwhelming reminder of the responsibility that God has given me. And I think the focus and the integrity and the character that God really has designed us to have, men, is played out directly right in front of us as we look at Father's Day going, are my kids becoming the kids that God has designed them to be? Are they becoming the men and women that he's called them to be? Am I helping them or am I hurting them? There's really no neutral in that. There's no passive. Either you're really helping them become those people that God has made them to be, or you're hurting them, you're harming it. And I think for me, that's kind of the wake-up call for us as a church today as we start to refocus. But here's what I love is that as we focus on being who God has called us to be, miracles happen. I mean, look up here. These are images just from the last several months here as people, I think over 65, maybe close to 70 people in the last 6 months have made decisions to follow Jesus like this. This is a miracle, and I think we need to celebrate this. I don't want to just like pass by this and go, well, that's a good 6 months. These are lives being changed. That's you sharing your faith, you engaging with your neighbors and your coworkers. At the same time, God has been drawing people to himself. We believe that if we just focus on our part, God does his part. Jesus promised in Matthew 16:18, I will build my church, and the gates of hell will not prevail against it. I was writing to some church planners, and it's easy to try to build our church. Some of you walked in the doors hoping to make real life your church, trying to make this thing your thing, and trying to kind of shape it into your thing. And really the conviction for us is it's not any of our thing, it's Jesus' thing. And it's our desire to become his church and not try to make it my church. And I think that's the temptation for a lot of us is I gotta kind of make it fit my needs and my comfort and my thing, and it's got to fit into my music style and my rubber color on the floor style, right? We're just from the gym. We just left it in here. We don't care. But we come to these moments where we realize God has been working a miracle. I mean, we just a few months ago, we were averaging about 450 people on a weekend. Now, 800 people easy on a weekend that call this their church. That's a miracle. I mean, in the last 4 to 6 months, that is amazing to see a church almost double in size in that short of time. I don't know if you know this or not, but that does not happen that way. It's just miraculous stuff. At the same time, I look at some individuals like Norm and Becky Erickson. They're some new group leaders that started leading a group, I think, a couple months ago. And at that same time, they started engaging with just family members and friends and started wanting to share Christ, but not wanting to do it in a bad way or a wrong way, and just recognizing that as they are just simply who God is calling them to be, God does his part. Literally on Monday, they were talking to some of the team on Tuesday, and they were just talking about on Monday. It was like all these people they've been talking to in the last couple months all started to call on the same day, on Monday. So Tuesday night was their group, and they were telling us Tuesday morning, literally they had 6 new people coming to their group this last week on Tuesday. These are friends, these are coworkers, people that God has been using them in their lives, and they're just seeing this kind of harvest massively in their life right now. That doesn't happen. That's miracle stuff. 6 people from work and from family members that are all coming to the same group, and it's just amazing to see this kind of miracle stuff happening in our midst. When we focus on being who God's called us to be, this is what happens. I look at our Thrive student ministry. That's our Wednesday night student ministry. It's called Thrive. I think just 6 months ago, there's about 15, 20 kids students consistently on Wednesday nights. That's kind of the beginnings of it all getting off the ground and all of this. Now, every single Wednesday, well over 80 people call this their student ministry. And it's amazing to see the ownership of the students in this ministry. They baptized, we were talking about, they baptized another person on Wednesday night. They leave tomorrow for camp. By the way, if your student is not getting on the bus tomorrow, you need to get them on the bus. I just heard about somebody out in the lobby just paid for a kid to go for free. Do not let some of those obstacles be your obstacles. Parents, you want your kids. This will be life-changing for them. They're leaving tomorrow morning. It's not too late to get them in. I think, just the miracle is not just that Wednesday night they have a really good deal going on, but there's students like Sam. Sam, I don't know if are you in here right now? Get up here if you are. I'd just love to celebrate for just a moment. He's not. Okay. He's a 14-year-old guy. This kid is learning how to be on mission with Jesus, and I just love this in his heart that he loves his friends, his schoolmates, and he's just so concerned with the mission that God has put. Him and his buddies have personally baptized 5 of their friends in middle school. That's amazing, isn't it? Some of us have never baptized one person, and here's a 14-year-old kid showing us how to do it. I love it, right? This is challenging for me. I go, wow, I want to be like Sam. Yeah, I do. He's a good guy. Listen to this. David and Shell, they're a new couple that's been coming to the church the last few months, and God's been doing cool miracles. And I just had them write their story down. Shell wrote this for us just to understand what God has been doing. I want you to hear this in their words. David and I just celebrated our 10th anniversary We have 4 young children. They keep us on our toes. Usually they keep us on our toes laughing. Our life these days is a whole lot of sticky, noisy, and messy. Thankfully, Jesus is all about taking our mess, especially the mess in our hearts, and turning it by the miracle of his grace into something beautiful. We both grew up in Christian families, and we both accepted Jesus as our Lord and Savior at a young age. We grew up in the church, but over years of being in unhealthy churches, we felt reluctant to get too close in a church for fear of being hurt. So we tended to stay hidden on the fringes. This past winter, after the birth of our 4th baby, we found ourselves in a dark place, feeling overwhelmed and isolated, stuck in survival mode, far from a place that felt like growth or freedom. Looking back now on that especially hard season, we see it as a storm of grace. It was exactly what we needed. God used that time of desperation to break us so we could begin to know and experience him in a deeper, more intimate way. We're so thankful for the way he has interrupted, I want you to hear this, he has interrupted our sleepy, comfortable, lukewarm lives as good American Christians. We have asked Jesus to make us hungry for him. When was the last time you asked him that? And to forgive us for living mostly selfish, self-absorbed lives. He is opening our eyes to how good things can often be the enemy of what's most important. That being and making much of Jesus and his glory and revealing his kingdom here. And he has used getting connected here at Real Life in real relationship to do that. Since coming to Real Life, God has done a miracle in our hearts and has given us a fresh desire and love for his word, his people, and a new burden for those who don't know him. We've encountered Jesus in a deeper way, and we've experienced what it means to truly be a disciple. God has used the people of this church body, you guys, who have taken the time and invested in loving and pointing us to Jesus, and who have encouraged us to take the next intentional step of obedience to become the man, the woman the Lord is calling us to be. And that is what we are experiencing, and there truly is no greater joy than the joy of drawing close to him and loving and serving Jesus as a couple and as a family. David wrote this. David said this. God has called me to lead my family. I'm here to serve in whatever way I can, to step up and see where God will lead me. This is a man in our church. My family and this church, as we learn to work diligently and to love well, I want to see people delivered from whatever it is that keeps them from Jesus. We feel so humbled to join the mission of RLM, to see the city experience the miracle of deliverance and freedom and life abundant that Jesus poured into our hearts, one precious person at a time. Here's an ordinary, normal, churchy church people being awakened to the reality of the mission that God has given us. This is a miracle. This is a complete miracle, what God is doing in David and Shell's life. You can celebrate that. That's okay. You know, our kids ministry, Life for Kids, when we moved into this building, I think we were averaging like 50 to 60 kids on a weekend. Well over now 200 kids every single week. We're clearing out a whole nother suite down here. The physical therapist moved out, and we're demoing all the walls, getting it ready for more kids. We got to have more space for kids. These are miracles that God is doing. I mean, that demo project, that's how Andy got in this tank right here. Somebody heard that we needed help, and they knew a family member that needed some help, and Andy came, and one of our guys got to sit down with him and hear his story and talk about what God was doing in his life, and here he is, 5 days later, giving his heart to Jesus in front of all of us. These are the kind of miracles that God is doing when we just will simply focus on the people that God has in front of us. All those people up there. Some of you are in these pictures right here. We recognize all of these miracles are just the result of God being so faithful as we're so committed to just being who he's called us to be. Here's the hard part, is that I recognize in my life and in many of our lives there's inconsistency. The challenge for me and the elders, the leaders of this organization, of this team, of this church that God has put in place, the focus has got to stay simple and true to being who God has called us to be, to reach the world for Jesus one person at a time. multiplying disciples and churches in real relationship. That is the strategy that Jesus used. We feel like that is the strategy we are obligated to use, and it's so easy to drift off. I don't know if you know me, but I'm driven. I'm passionate. We're going, and we got to take ground. I feel like the kingdom of God has always been advancing, and for us to not be advancing, we are somehow missing the heart and the will of God. And sometimes, though, that ambition gets overzealous and kind of over into this sinful spot of almost idolatry, where I start kind of worshiping the idol of success and achievement. I don't know, man, if you wrestle with that at all in your lives, but I do. Even in the church world, even in this awesome church world thing. And so I find us as a leadership team kind of on this slippery thing where we need to be who God's called us to be, and we know that that's a passionate, forceful advancement of the kingdom, but at the same time, we struggle with sin in our hearts, and we go, God, you've got to help us refocus. And so this is a season for us, this summer, this June, July, August season for us to refocus. We really believe that this is not a time to check out and to mail it in and just go have vacations and just do our thing and forget about Jesus and the church and all that he's called us to, but to really passionately refocus our hearts. I want to show you something. This is just kind of a glimpse into who we are and how things work here. This is a funnel. I know it's not beautiful, but it is. If you want to look at what God has called us to, the very first thing we feel like this looks like, a core purpose for us is to pursue people. Some of you, you've learned this by inviting people to our weekend experience. This is how our weekend is so important to us, is that we believe Jesus is pursuing us, and we're responding to his pursuit of us, and people are coming to encounter God, and we're learning how to pursue others at the same time, and this pursuit really comes to a culmination on our weekend experience. But for many of us, this is all we know of real life, is just a weekend experience, but this is not it. This is really the beginning. This is like the top of the funnel, you know. God starts to bring people to experience who he is. We have a city that's mostly de-churched. A lot of people have had and tried church experiences in the past. Tried that, been there, done that, no thanks to this, to that, too much of that, and I didn't like that, and so I walked away. And here, God brings us back. My story's the same. Brings us back, and he starts to give us hope in his church again. But this is really the first step that we see, and for us, the next piece for us as an organization, as a team, is that we have got to learn to connect into real relationship. It doesn't just stop here at learning to pursue Jesus and pursuing others for the mission, but learning to take this step into real relationship and to connect. The church has always advanced in relationship. We don't believe that this is just a great strategy. We believe this is God's strategy. He designed us to be in relationship with him and relationship with each other. There's a real intimate definition of God's design for relationship. And outside of that, I believe that we're walking outside of what God has called us to and made us for. This is why we're always talking about, hey, church, take your next step. You hear us use that language? This is what it looks like. We want you to learn how to connect in real relationship. Just to exist here is not the sum total of your life. Just to survive another few weeks before you make it back to church again is not it. That is not the fulfillment that David and Shell are talking about in their story. There's so much more, and it begins as we learn to be in real relationship with each other, but it doesn't stop there. We also learn who God has made us to be, and we learn to minister with our time, our talents, our treasure, all that God has given us. We learn to use those gifts for his kingdom and his glory to advance. This life is not about us, and we've come to grips with that, and we are excited about that, and we are calling people to help take that next step. Did you know that right now, this morning, 205 are making this Sunday morning experience happen? That's people that are committed to learning to be Jesus Church this way and saying, hey, I don't know what it looks like to hold babies, but I'm going to do whatever it takes. Hey, I'm just learning how to do technology and play music and whatever it is. But I believe God has called me. He's given me this opportunity. I'm going to do what God has given me to do to help others experience who God is. But it doesn't, again, stop there. And a lot of times that's where kind of the sum total of church kind of ends, is right there. Well, I'm an usher, and I've been an usher for 25 years, and I'm a really good usher, and so I'm spiritually mature. But we see that the model that Jesus gave us is to learn how to make disciples. Disciples grow in real relationship. If you're not in relationship with people, you can't make disciples. That's why God's given us families, not to run away from or escape to the work week from, but to actually multiply disciples from within. That's why it's important to have lots of babies, right? And to multiply these disciples throughout the world. And I believe that many of us have never, ever walked somebody through the process of growing as a disciple. God's called us and given us a challenge to be spiritual parents, to take responsibility for the next spiritual generation and help people grow from spiritual infancy. Right where Andy's at right now, just coming out of this water, that's not the end of it. He's got to learn how to take these steps that are in front of him, and I believe he needs you as a church to help him take these steps. We got to refocus. I think one of the biggest spots we got to refocus is in connect. Right here, for people to learn how to connect in real relationship. About 300 of us right now, a little over 300 of us are connected in a real relationship. One of the biggest things that breaks my heart is that there's literally about 1,400 adults that call this our church. It's like 20% of us. That's us not being who God has called us to be. We believe disciples are made in relationship, yet 20% of us are in this kind of biblical disciple-making relationship. That's inconsistent. Does that make sense? This is God kind of challenging us to refocus. Do you know our groups pastors are doing an amazing job? I think there's 12 new groups getting ready to get off the ground in the next 2 weeks. It's a lot of work. That's room for another 120 to 150 of you to connect in a real relationship in these new groups with new leaders that are scared to death. One of the things that we've had to do strategically to help us refocus is Greg Turbin. He was just up here a few minutes ago. He's one of the greatest groups pastors I ever known. We moved over here together, and we were co-workers over there in Coeur d'Alene at that church in Post Falls. And it was amazing to see God use this man in that world over there. And as we came over here, we wore about 400,000 different hats as we were trying to learn how to plant a church. We'd never done this together. We'd never done it, period. What I love about this man's heart is he's willing to do whatever it takes to move the mission forward. And many times in that kind of voids or there's gaps or chasms, he would take up whatever needs to be taken up and he'd carry it and go, but we're losing kind of the ground of intimate, real relationship, people getting connected, and so we've moved Greg. We're taking him out of this kind of associate, kind of hodgepodge role and put him into a role as one of our Connect Group pastors. And we've given him the nether regions, the North County, the Timbuktu, up there, right? You Canadians, right? We believe, I'm just messing with you. I believe God is bringing so many of you from such a long ways away. We have got to help you connect in a real relationship. So we've strategically moved Greg into that part of the world. And he is built for that. Dude was out cutting firewood with one of you guys and almost cut his leg off last week. And it's just how God has made that guy. And I love him. He's one of the best groups pastors I know. At the same time, we've got to refocus. Every one of us learning how to use our gifts and our abilities to minister for the kingdom. I said 205, that's a big number, but it literally is going to take about 400 of us on a weekend as we continue to grow, as we come into this fall, pulling off every single weekend experience. That's a lot of people, from parking teams to coffee teams to kids teams to music teams, all across the board. Everything has got to almost double in order for us to continue to be effective. A lot of work. One of the biggest things that I feel like we need to refocus on is our downtown location. Many of you know that at Easter we launched a second location downtown, Sunday nights at 5:30. Some of you are like, what? I didn't know that. Well, welcome to the family. We're just getting you in the loop here. Sunday nights at 5:30, and we were super excited and are super excited about this. We believe God has called us to take this step. But here's what we are noticing is we didn't prepare very well to take this step. It's humbling for us. There's some major issues when we start to look at downtown, and there's some places of refocus that we got to look at. And one of the core pieces that we missed on would be our leadership. The core leadership of what it takes. Remember I was talking and describing Tomato Street and these men? These were men that said, no matter what it takes, we are going to learn to be Jesus Church in this city. We're committed to doing it personally, intentionally. I need your help. We need courage together to be the men that God is calling us to be. We missed that mark when we took that step downtown. So we've got overextended leaders. We've got people doing double duty up north and downtown. We've got people that are hurting, and we have got to do something about it. At the same time, the location that we're in is a major issue. It's not going to be a family-friendly location. Some of you have brought your kids, and we'll never bring them back again. It's just the nature of second and division in our city. We overlooked that. We thought, oh, no, we'll have security and we'll make it, we'll do these things. And at the same time, I'm like, I don't let my little girls leave my sight when we're down there. And because of that, we recognize that we've missed it when it comes to identifying that as a location. The third thing would be this, the time. Sunday evening is a great time for those that can't make it on Sunday mornings, but the majority of the people in the city that we are trying to reach are not just a evening demographic. Most often, you're going to find people to connect with you, to go to church with you when you're inviting them to a Sunday morning experience. So we look at all of that and we go, okay, what do we do? Well, it's clear that we need to refocus and we need to rebuild. Paul talks about in 1 Corinthians 3 how he's a church planner. He laid an expert foundation, he says. I laid an expert foundation, and that foundation is Christ. We have got to relay the foundation in our downtown location. And what is that foundation going to look like? Well, it's going to start the same place it started here, and I believe it has always started in Jesus' church, and it's going to start with the men. We need 30 men that are committed to living out this mission in real relationship with each other, committed to be in the church before we have church services. On top of that, we need disciple-making groups. We need 25 groups that are willing to invite, to connect, to invest in people and help them become who God has called them to be. Remember that whole piece of making disciples. At the same time, we need 100 people that are willing to serve, to pull off a second location. We can't keep sucking people from this location to try to make another location happen. We're wearing people out. And in doing that, we're stretching ourselves too thin, and we're overextending ourselves, and we're ineffective. And I think that's the thing for me is I look at it and I go, man, we want so bad to move the mission forward, and we get ahead of ourselves like this, and then we become ineffective all over the place. And this refocus is about us being who God has called us to be, knowing that if we will just be faithful and diligent in those small, simple little things of learning how to lead my family, learning how to lead a small group, learning how to invite my neighbors and my coworkers to church, these simple little things will lead to these massive amount of miracles that we've been talking about, all that God has been doing. And we see the need, the base attendance need to be around 300 people for us to legitimately launch another location downtown Spokane. We believe God has called us to take this step. We believe God has called us to refocus this step at the same time. We missed it in some of these areas. And so as we see these benchmarks start to come about, as we intentionally are leading, what's so cool? As we have just refocused like this, God has already started to honor our efforts in this. We for the first time, we met on Thursday morning with these men, this last Thursday morning. We were at an eldership meeting trying to hammer out our budget for the next fiscal year until, I think, midnight is when we finally got. And then I was up at, 4:35 a.m. to get ready for this group. And being there was so inspiring to me because I think we had 19 men in the room our first time there. And we already have 28 men that have committed to being a part of this team. We're like, we got to reestablish this foundation, and God just goes, boom, there you go. You want a foundation? This inspires me so much because I know that as we just focus on what God has called us to focus on, He builds His church. We don't got to work at it. He does it. Here's the thing, though. In order to do this, we have got to refocus our energies on this foundation. And so next Sunday night is going to be our last weekly service at that second and division location. This is a hard step for us because I don't take steps back. I don't know if you know me, but I do not do that. And at the same time, at the cost and the expense of the team, the efforts and the energy that people have been pouring their lives out, I go, no, this is best for us to reestablish the foundation that God has called us to put in place. And so next Sunday night, here's what I want you to do. We're not going to go out with like 12 of us in the room. Here's how we're going to do this. I'm going to invite every single one of you. We're going to be one church all over this region, multiple locations. This is going to be your first shot to get a taste of that. Some of you don't go downtown. You live north and you don't drive south of Francis. I know. Sorry. But I'm going to ask you to get out of your comfort zone with me for a moment. And I want you to come with us next Sunday night down there. We're going to spend the whole evening at 5:30 p.m. at that second and division location. We're going to spend the whole evening in prayer and in worship for God to help us reestablish, refocus this work in downtown Spokane as we get the infrastructure, the foundation built for what it's going to look like for us to launch at a permanent location with giving established, that we're not sucking resources from either location, but to legitimately have two separate locations in this city. We're learning. We launched this knowing this is going to be a huge learning process, and here we are in the middle of it learning like, oh man, we could write a book on what not to do. That is so hard. But I believe that God is leading us. I want you to come with us next Sunday night. I know you're not going to make that your church location. I want you to make this your church that you invite to, that you serve at, that you pray for, that we're all going to be one church, but I want you to go with us to help us launch this new phase of kind of building the foundation that God has given us next Sunday night. We're going to meet tonight. I'm going to share this with everybody downtown, and then next week we're going to all get down there. We'll pack it out. I think it can hold like 300 people if we're lucky, and it'll be hot, but it'll be fun. And I want you to come with us. We're going to pray, we're going to worship, and ask God to do miracles in that part of our city. Here's how we're going to end today, as I want to pray right now. I'm going to ask the communion team to go get ready to serve communion to all of us, if you would. Music team, would you come help me up here on the stage? The ushers are going to bring these elements of communion, and they're going to hand you one of each. Just take it and hold on to it. We're going to pray together for a moment, and then we'll take communion together. So I want to do this together, unified as a church. When I look at where we are and where we've been and where we're going, I get so excited about the miracles that God is going to do in you and through you. You know, of those men that are already committed to downtown, 2/3, if not more, of those guys don't serve here, are brand new here. Some of them haven't even been to church here yet. I love what Jesus says when he says, lift up your eyes. A harvest is here. It's happening. Jesus asked us to pray for workers. As a staff, we put it on our calendars every day at 10 a.m. You can pray with us. We're praying that God will bring more workers to the harvest field. The harvest in our city is ripe. It's huge. And as the elders and I have been praying diligently the last 3 weeks over this and these decisions and this refocus, we are so excited. Go ahead and pass those, please. Start passing those now. We're so excited about what God is going to do as we just simply refocus our hearts on what's most important. And here's the challenge for all of us as we come in here today, all scattered, all over the place. Some of you don't even know Jesus at all. And you're hearing kind of in behind the scenes of who we are and how we work and all of this, but you're getting the elements of communion in your hands right now. And this is what it's all about for us. Really, this is who it's all about for us. You're going to grab a cracker and a juice. You're literally holding the body, blood of Jesus in your hands. These symbols bring unity to our hearts. We can talk all this stuff, talk all this language, but if we don't have this foundation established, this foundation that Paul talked about that he laid, it is Christ. It is Christ in you. It's not Christ as a concept, it is Jesus in you. This is when we take this, we're literally putting Jesus inside of us. You see that? It's the ultimate act of submission and willingness that we would actually say, Jesus, I choose to put my faith in you, that you are God and that you can take my sin and my shame away, that I don't have to live condemned, fearful anymore. I can walk in courage. I can walk in passion. Some of you, it's been a long time since you've been passionate about anything. By putting Christ in us, he awakens us to his purposes and his plans for our lives. That's what we hold in our hands is Jesus. This is where we are unified as a church and becoming Jesus' church. Not someone else's. Not trying to make their thing our thing. Not trying to make your thing our thing. We're trying to make Jesus the main thing in every one of our hearts. This is why we take communion every single week as a church. Front and center. I'm submitted. I'm committed. He is my Lord. He is my King. He is in control of my life. This is where we stand as a church. We want you to be a part of this with us. We want you to learn to make Jesus your King. We want you to learn to serve him with your life, experiencing fulfillment that you have never tasted before. Joy that you have longed for. Hope that you have ached for. We believe is possible, all in Jesus. I want to pray. Just maybe bow your heart in a place of submission before God right now. Maybe just close your eyes and you're just refocusing your own heart. You're starting to ask yourself this question, where am I at with Jesus right now? Do I know him? If you don't, this is your opportunity to begin a relationship with Jesus right now. Even as you and I are going to take this cracker and this juice together in a moment. This is going to be your moment where you begin to place your faith in Jesus. If you don't have faith in Jesus, this cracker and this juice mean nothing. Those of us that have put our faith in Him, this means everything. Where do you stand with Him? Some of you need to repent. You've been trying to lead this life on your own. You're your own king. You're your own God. Coming to a place of submission before Him and saying, God, I need you to lead this life. Last thing I want to pray is this, as we take this step of courage to refocus as a church. I think it's easy to say yes. It's really hard to say no. It takes courage to say no. It takes courage to be consistent day in and day out. We need to pray. God would give us the strength, the wisdom, the conviction to be the men and women that He's calling us to be the church that He's calling us to be, to refocus our hearts in the way that He has called us to. Even here on Father's Day, this is going to be a monumentous day that we look back on as a church in much gratitude and much humility as we get our hearts right before Him to become the people that He has called us to be. Let's pray that God would use us in this city, in this region, that God would advance His kingdom through us. Just pray right now in faith. Father, I think of Hezekiah coming in to Jerusalem to shouts of God bless it. God bless it. Because you had made the mountains low and the valleys full. You had put that city and that temple back together, God. You had allowed your people to refocus on what's most important. It's you being their God. Them existing as a people to bless the nations. God, I pray that as we refocus our hearts right now, there would be shouts and sounds of God bless it. God, you are good and you are in control. We submit our hearts to you right now as your people. And we ask, God, that you would bless this church, that you would bless these efforts just to be the people that you're calling us to be. God, that shouts of God has blessed these people, this church, would rise up all over this city because of the evidence of your leadership and your authority in our lives. God, as you are displaying your power and your glory, you are bringing your presence in our midst, oh God. We are your people. We are called by name. We stand in confidence before you that you have chosen us. You have brought us out of darkness and into light that we may declare your praises, oh God. May this city know in a very loud and a very clear way that you are God. That Jesus, you really are able to save us from ourselves, to save us from our shame, to bring us out of death and bring us into life. God, make us a people that sing it loud, that shout it loud, that declare your praises, oh God, that are not content to just live a ho-hum, doldrum life and go through motions, but step out of the comfort and the chaos, God, and step into the clarity of the mission and the purpose that you have given us for this life. Jesus, we focus our hearts on you right now. We place you front and center in submission, God, to you. We worship you. We seek you. We love you. You are our King. On the night that Jesus was betrayed, he took bread after he had given thanks. He broke it and said, "This is my body, which is given for you. Do this in remembrance of me." Let's eat together, church. In the same way, after dinner, he took the cup and he says, "This cup represents my blood, the blood of the new covenant. Every time you drink this, remember me. Let's drink together. Make Jesus first. In this place of submission and reverence, would you stand before God right now? Would you just stand up with me? We're going to sing this song. Just focus in our hearts. Put Jesus front and center in our hearts, asking Him to grow His church through us, asking Him to help us be the church that He's called us to be, to not allow our life to get distracted and all these other things that are going to be great. It's going to be an awesome summer. But we're asking Jesus to keep our focus on Him, on His people. No other name will we be singing, will we be shouting, will we be telling everybody about other than Jesus. Let's sing this. Let's worship together. Philip, keep my mic on. I want to just pray together here in a second. Let's sing this.